Welcome to Heart to Heart.
This is Christina. Thank you for joining us today. And you are?
I'm still Robert. How are you today?
I'm actually doing really good.
Well, good.
Thank you. I'm looking
So,
forward to our discussion.
well, what will our discussion be today?
Well, I think last time we started touching upon the mirror. So I thought this would be a very interesting conversation to have between the two of us to talk about exactly what is this mirror? What are we even talking about by saying a conversation on a mirror? We don't mean a mirror on the wall.
Well,
Essentially it is kind of.
well,
But
then
what is it?
I'll ask that question. What do you mean, Christina, by mirror?
By the mirror, I believe that is something that you see a reflection of yourself in another human being. So in other words, when you have a person in your life, any type of relationship in your life, when you converse with that person, you're actually being shown aspects of your own self and your own being. And it's almost like, if you're aware of it, you can tell exactly where you are in your spiritual growth and progress by who you meet, by who you're around. And it can be very interesting, to say the least, to see yourself in another human being. And what I mean by seeing yourself is not like, oh, this person looks like me. What I'm talking about is your traits, your character traits, your personality, who you are, the things that you admire in somebody else is what a reflection of your own strengths. And the things that you complain about, or that you I guess you don't complain, first you notice them in another human being. And if you think, well, this person is really lazy, well, the universe is trying to tell you, knock knock, maybe there's a place in your own life that you need to work on, because you can't notice something in another human being that's not in yourself. It's not possible. It's how the universe works. And that's my perception, briefly, as an introduction, about what a mirror is. So why don't we have your interpretation of what a mirror is, and then maybe we can go a little deeper into it.
I think, in my experience, that this is not something to believe in. It really is something to notice. And what I've noticed is that the mirror, the way the world mirrors back to me a lot of times, is it's mirroring, that's hard to say, mirroring. It's mirroring certain beliefs that I hold, or specifically beliefs about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also like to point out, just physically, when we look in a mirror, what we're trying to do is to see ourselves. And guess what we see? We see a reverse image. It's pretty much two-dimensional, almost three-dimensional, but not really. And what's interesting to me is, just like when we do these talks, and then you see yourself and you're like, do I look like that? And you hear your voice the first time, you go, I don't sound like that. We really do have a hard time seeing ourselves, figuratively and physically.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that our stories mirror to us, and this really dovetails nicely into what we talked about last week about the wagon. In my experience, that little wagon that we pull around, full of beliefs that don't serve us, hurt feelings, resentments, all the stories, that we've experienced. What we tend to do is to judge the people that hurt us in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Then, if we don't notice quickly enough, pretty soon we'll be down the road in the story, and we'll find ourselves acting out and being like the person that we judged. So I think that's the biggest purpose of the mirror, but it helps when you begin to notice the echoes or the reflections.
Yeah, when I consciously became aware of the fact that this existed, never heard of it before, I would start really paying attention to the different people in my life. And it's really interesting that the older relationships that I have, oh, that's Abby making an appearance. My dog's gonna bark a little bit here and there in these things. But
we talk to Abby a lot.
We do. So the relationships that I've had the longest, those relationships are very interesting to me, because from those friends, I can see a lot of the characteristics I used to have before I became a little bit more spiritual and more conscious and more aware of my own behaviors. So before that point, before I was quote unquote, we'll say awakened somewhat, I just had friends, and you just gravitate, you have common interests, or, you know, I was a mom, I made friends that were moms. You know, you go through different phases of life and you meet people and you become friends with those people. But as you grow spiritually, as you become more conscious and more aware, and you start to see life differently, perceive life differently, you start to change. And those old relationships that you have, most of the time those people are exactly like they were when you met them. So it creates a little bit of a vibrational difference. And I can see from the relationships that I've had for many years, and I'm talking like 20, 30 years, some of these friendships, I can see exactly where I was at that point. In other words, so instead of judging those friends and saying, you know what, these friends are just gossiping all the time. Yeah, I used to be a big gossip, I admit. I used to talk about, because I didn't know any different. I didn't, this is just something that I did. So, and I remember, as a little segue here for a moment, I remember when I was studying and learning and becoming more spiritual, and I remember reading about not gossiping anymore. And I was so shocked by that.
Yeah, what are we going to talk about?
Exactly. I thought, what in the world am I going to talk about with what do I say? I don't even know what to say. So I had to change my language, which was very difficult. So I really wanted to, though. I didn't want to be that person who gossips or talks about other people. So I really made a conscious choice, and I would pay attention to my thoughts and try to say things that were only kind. So these relationships that I was in the past, that we would talk like this, the person would still be trying to talk to me about these things, and I would be trying to turn the subject around or do whatever I can. And a part of me, we read, it's interesting, because there's a lot of things that even on Mastership that we post about letting go and walking away from negative people. But one of the things that I realized is that you're really walking away from an aspect of yourself, going back to the mirror. I mean, this is the way I used to be. So this person doesn't know any better. So why, if this person doesn't know, would I cut off a 20, 30-year friendship? Wouldn't it be better if I could figure out a way to lift this person up and out? So that's kind of the way I view it, in terms of trying to hold on to some older relationships where that person hasn't grown. But at the same token, I do find some of my friends have grown through the years and become a little bit more spiritual. So we're kind of growing together. Maybe not at the same pace, but there's still, I can see growth in some of my older friendships that I still have. But that mirror is basically showing us aspects of ourselves that we need to be aware of. And a lot of times you say, oh no, not me. I don't do that. I don't act like that. But yet, if you really think about it and you really are not afraid to look at yourself, you might actually be a little shocked at what you see.
Well, and one thing I've noticed is sometimes, here's an analogy, like a funhouse mirror, where it's exaggerated, it's larger than. Um, but it's still trying to get our attention. And here's something to think about. If you and I don't get along well, then I can go somewhere else. You know, I can engage with other people, and you can do the same.
Mm-hmm.
But everywhere I go, I take me with me. There is this inescapable me that I'm stuck with. In the mirror, every morning, I wake up with this person. Now, think about this for a minute. Again, we don't like the sound of our voice. We're not sure we look good.
Mm-hmm.
We're not sure about this. We're not sure about that. There's a real depth within humanity of not liking ourselves very much. And then you have this other extreme of the ego to where it's, you know, the whole a false self that's being projected out there, and you're not being genuine. You're not really saying what you mean. You're acting. We try on different characters.
Mm-hmm.
We do different things that way. So the mirror effect in our life story, again, is to help us to really see ourselves clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
An example, several years ago, a friend contacted me and was going through a difficult time with someone, and this person was sending nasty emails and saying a lot of hurtful things. And of course, you know, we get something like that. It's funny, we do with an email like we do in our head. We read it over and over.
Yeah,
we keep putting our hand on the hot stove. Ow, that hurt. I think I'll do that again. So I suggested to my friend, I said, now, take a lot of courage to do this, but here's what I suggest. Let's get off the phone, go back and read that thing again from this perspective. And you have to be painfully honest with yourself and to yourself and about yourself. I said, go read what this person is saying to you. Is that what you believe about yourself in some ways? Are these some things, some opinions that you hold about yourself? And just look at it from that perspective. Well, a little bit later, the phone rang, and it was like, oh my, oh my. This person is saying things to me in such an ugly way, but I say these things or hold these opinions about myself, and it's not true. It wasn't true. A lot of the things that we don't like about ourselves wasn't true to begin with. It was based on a misperception. It's based on a bad experience. It was based on someone else's opinion. It was based on anything but actually getting to know this inescapable you.
Exactly. Well, we're born loving human beings. And somewhere along the line, we get conditioned by parents, by society, and we forget that we're really just this loving person. And we assume this role of protecting ourselves from this person, from that person. So our quest to being more spiritual is becoming who we naturally are at our core, which is very loving. And our interaction with people, in every person we meet, and that's our goal, is to just be as loving and kind as you can.
Something about the term that you just used, becoming more spiritual. As far as I know, water does not become more wet unless we're having different temperatures. Water's wet. It's inherent in that. What we are, the consciousness that we are, is spirit.
Right.
And
well, that's true.
What we experience, most of the time, we call it emotions. But what we experience in life are thoughts, emotions, the energy of that, our internal reaction to things. None of that is physical.
Right.
None of it's physical. It's all what we call spiritual, and different people have put in different labels on terms.
Right.
But
well, that's true. That's true, because we in order for us to comprehend the process, we have to speak it into words. but it's hard to speak something into words that's consciousness and infinite. So we're trying to try to share our thoughts in a language that we feel people will understand.
That's right.
And that's the only way, that's the only tools that we have, because it's an experience that each person has at the core of their human being. It's an inner experience. It's who we are. So if we're trying to guide somebody there, the way to guide them there is to try to describe it in ways that the best way that we can. But it's like trying to describe something that can't be labeled or can't be spoken about.
Right. And interestingly enough, in my observance, and we've done this throughout history, a lot of malfunctions happen. And if you think about it from one perspective, it's natural that would happen. But the malfunctions happen in us trying to be spiritual. Mm-hmm. One of the marks of somebody trying to be spiritual is that they're trying to be something that they're not, or trying to be someone that they're not. And they'll adopt a different speech. They'll adopt different, lingo. We'll buy paraphernalia. We'll get different bumper stickers. Mm-hmm. We'll use different catchphrases, different labels, all trying to get somewhere or to become spiritual, rather than noticing what the nature of being spirit is.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely a good point, and that's very true. Is just really what we're trying to let go of is all the falsity that we've attached to our own being as to who we're not. So it's about really trying to become, or just allowing yourself to bloom. It's like a flower inside of you, As one person once described it to me, it's like you're under a pile of leaves. Just think of your body under a pile of leaves, and each leaf is like what people have said to you in the past, or this person said you're this, and then you assume that, and then you're kind of like below this pile of leaves, but one at a time, the leaves are just kind of blowing away, just one by one by one by one, and then all of a sudden, there you are, and you've always been there. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think about that analogy a lot, because it truly, definitely makes sense. It makes sense.
It does. It does to be too. There was something else that crossed my mind while you were talking, and then I distracted myself by listening to you, which is always a good thing, don't you think?
Yeah, but just going back to the mirror, we should bring it back to our topic for today and see. I mean, I think it's one of the things that I noticed throughout this spiritual journey was that I almost felt at one point like I was in the twilight zone, because every person that I met, I would see aspects of myself. And at one point, I really did want to just make it stop.
You know what I did? I changed my name to Everyman.
There you go.
Because I saw myself everywhere.
Exactly. That's exactly what it feels like. And the thing, it's so interesting because if we have somebody in our life and we're seeing something that's not complimentary, like we're seeing, oh, this person is just being really mean, or this person is gossiping, or this person is doing this, and we start to see that in another human being, it's actually still, again, it's that mirror reflecting something back to us that needs healing. And it's a very hard thing to notice, because a lot of people, oh no, not me, I don't do that. This person is this way, but I'm not like that. But it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but there could be an aspect, there's something, because you can't see in another person what doesn't exist in your own being. You can't. So if you're seeing something that's on the negative side, there's something being reflected back to you. You're seeing something within your own being that you need to work on.
Well, and I think the key word that you just mentioned, and it's the thought that ran away a while ago, is healing. The purpose of it is for healing. And if we'll stop and think about that for just a second, if you fall down and skin your knee, you don't give any conscious thought to white blood cells, but there's thought behind that. There's intelligence behind that. And the white blood cells are deployed. And well, I can't tell, I'm not a doctor, but all the different things that happen, the blood, here's a doctor word, coagulates. A scab begins to form that we're not supposed to pick at. We're supposed to let it heal. So that's a very natural thing, and it's very immediate. It's important, in my opinion, to understand this. It's immediate. When an injury occurs, immediately healing begins. There's a deployment of healing that begins. Now watch this. We are spirit. We are immaterial outside this body. This body gives us something to express through, like a communication device, but we are the consciousness within the body expressing through this body. So when we are wounded emotionally, mentally, or whatever, immediately, okay, things begin to happen to try to heal. So we talked about triggers before. I can tell you a story, I think, that might illustrate this. It's kind of a grown-up story. I was with a client, in the sales world, and sometimes you, after work, you go to a place, you go to a bar, you go to a restaurant. We were in this, I think it was a sports bar, and it was happy hour, and there was a lot of people there. And my client was so happy because he had this beautiful young woman, giving him some attention, and she was flirting. So I just let them do what they were doing, and I was having a sip of what I was drinking and just sitting and listening. And I need to filter this. The next thing I knew, this same woman was whispering in my ear. We'll just say it that way. And she actually was propositioning me and listing prices. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so I did what any man should do in that situation. I reached for my wallet and I pulled it out and I opened it up and I said, I turned to some photographs and I said, this is my daughter. And I told her my daughter's name and some things about her. And I said, this is my son, and made a couple comments. This is my other son. Her countenance totally changed. She was very triggered. And she was like, why didn't he say that? Why didn't he this? And why didn't he that? And she went on this rant that became a story. And the story was about her father. And her father had decided that he was going to go gamble a lot and drink a lot, do a lot of cocaine, and spend a lot of time with prostitutes. And her father died in Las Vegas from a cocaine overdose with a couple of prostitutes. Now think about that for a minute. But we're still in the encounter. So she's telling me this story. And I look at her and I said, listen, I said, you're having a bad dream. I said, do you understand what's happening right now? Do you understand why you're doing what you're doing? I said, everything's going to be okay. I said, we can heal this. And she let out a shriek and left me sitting at the bar with my client who was not happy with me. And he told me that he's not ever going to go out with me again because he attracts beautiful women and I send them running away screaming. So, but now if you stop and think about that for a minute, I'm telling this because I think she doesn't realize she's trying to heal. and she's angry. She's angry at the prostitutes that took up her father's time and wasn't with her, and she wants to be with her father. And how's she going to be with her father? And all of a sudden, she's prostituting herself, and she's making plays for older men, and she's trying to have intimate relations with older men. If you take all the judgment out of what somebody would think about a soul like that and understand that this precious girl is trying to heal herself, and if she'll look in the mirror of her story, this stuff that she's carried around in her little wagon that she's dragging behind her in her unconscious mind has not been healed.
And you cracked open some light. So you said some light, and that's why she went out.
And I have no idea whatever happened.
No.
That's not my job.
Right. But you just like gave her a little glimpse of some light that may or may not continue to open, or it might close back up, but at least you offered something to her. You gave her something to think about in her life, in her story. And that's very powerful. And I think we can always, in every interaction that we have, we can be that vessel of light. We can offer that insight. We can offer hope, but we have to be able to see deeper into the story. Like what you just described is you're looking at the surface. The person you were with, was at the surface. You were looking deeper into it. So all he could see was, oh, here's this beautiful woman. Ooh, I might get something. You know what I mean? So he's not looking into, why is this person doing this? So you were not seeing with your physical eyes. You were looking deeper with the spiritual intuition and sense. And so that's why you were able to be that angel in that moment, to offer her something, a different reality that could be a part of her life, if she was aware.
Right. Well, and only she knows wherever she is and how her story went, if that helped at all. But it was just how I chose to respond to the situation without really giving it any thought. She was not much older than my daughter.
Right.
But I didn't want to scold her and tell her she was doing something wrong. Because you're not doing anything wrong when you're trying to heal. What you're doing something wrong is you're not paying attention to a healing process that's unfolding within you, and you're acting out some things rather than healing them. We don't think we can heal them, but we can.
Right. And essentially every interaction with every human being is that interchange.
That's right.
Of love and healing. And offering healing. And if we're aware of that, we can know that the people that sort of nudge us the most, the people that kind of get a little bit under our skin, if we can look a little bit deeper, we'll realize that honestly, they're just want love. That's what they're searching for. They want our attention. They want our acceptance, and they don't want the judgment. And if they don't feel that from you, you can have this amazing, beautiful relationship with just about anyone that you meet.
Oh yeah, we make it hard because we don't realize. Okay, we don't realize we're triggering each other. We don't realize that a healing process immediately was launched at the time of injury. It has been working in the background, and how that communicates.
Right.
Again, how does spirit communicate? And this mirroring effect is one of the most common ways.
Right.
And this goes back to the wisdom that says, judge not, lest you be judged. And by the same measure that you measure, that's going to be measured to you. Now, guess what that just means? In layman's terms, you're going to become what you judge. That person that hurt you, you can be angry with them as long as you want to. After a while, you're going to look just like them. Christina, there's one more thing about the mirror analogy.
Okay.
If you looked in the mirror and your hair was a mess, would you brush the mirror?
Would I brush the mirror? No. I would brush my hair.
That's right. So in the mirror analogy, a takeaway is, if we'll notice, we're looking in a mirror, we don't like what we see,
Mm-hmm.
and then we want to jump into the mirror and try to change all the reflections that we see in other people. Trying to brush the mirror. It doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy for people to actually see how it really works.
And sometimes people mirror back to you how you used to be. And you can say, I remember when I was that way.
Exactly.
And that's not to make you feel bad. That's to give you a little encouragement. Look how far you've come.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Christina, I always love talking with you. I'm glad you started this little heart-to-heart idea.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes.
We'll see where it goes.
And if it doesn't go anywhere, we'll just enjoy our conversations together.
I was going to say, who cares? It doesn't matter.
All right. We'll
We're
talk to
still
you.
putting the energy out there, It doesn't matter if anybody listens or not. Our words have wings.
I hope so. Well, I've enjoyed it. I look forward to talking with you next week.
Yes, and me too. So until next week.
Until next week.
We'll see you all.
Heart to heart.
Heart to heart.
Okay. I'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.